Good morning. Welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Again, our topic today is going to return to wild horses and their management. Prior to 1971, there was no federal regulation of wild horses. If there were too many horses on the range, a landowner would simply take care of it, including the federal government, the state government. They would gather up the horses, do what they needed to do. They would sell them off. They would send them to wherever. It's no longer like that today because with the passage of the act, while a good act, the enforcement of the act has created several problems that has led to massive overpopulation because we no longer can do whatever needed to be done. That will be the topic of our discussion. To start, though, let's take a look at the creation of the Wild Horse and Burro Act, the costs associated with managing it the way the federal government is managing it right now, and then we will move on to our discussion.
Living symbols of the historic and pioneer spirit of the West. A declaration made by the Wild Horse and Burro Act of 1971, which has since protected these animals on 31.6 million acres of public lands in 10 western states. These herd management areas, or HMAs, are managed by the BLM to protect both the horses and the range. The protection of wild horses and burros has created a unique challenge because the law, as it is applied today, protects the horse above everything else. The BLM estimates that there are 49,209 wild horses and burros on the range, with another 47,393 wild horses and burros currently in short-term corrals or long-term pastures. The question that has plagued land managers is how to control an animal that has virtually no natural predators on the range, and the potential to double herd sizes every 4 years.
We have a budget that's approaching $80 million, and we're talking about a $40, $50, $60 million budget just going towards holding and caring for animals. And even your horse advocates are actually saying, okay, that's not the answer to this. That's not where we want to go with that. So I've seen a shift over the last few years where the public is actually coming out and saying, you know, that's not the answer. We have 50,000 in holding right now. We don't need to keep going that direction. We need to find some new ideas, some new ways of doing things.
The Wild Horse and Burro program was established to keep herds at an appropriate level for each herd area. When there are too many horses on the range, the BLM has tools for management. But for every tool they have, there seems to be a group that opposes its use.
We've adopted hundreds of thousands of horses and burros over the years, so that's our main primary tool. The other one is a sale criteria. We do have the ability to sell animals that are older or animals that have been to multiple adoptions and not adopted. Reception from the public, that's not very popular. We don't really place a lot of animals that way. And so besides that, if we don't adopt them or sell them, we place them in long-term pastures or holding. We do not euthanize horses, and so it's very limited. Some people say, well, you could turn them back out to the range. Well, that's not an option. That's not a tool that we can use. Once they're removed from the range, we have to find a home for them. And so that's the situation we're in.
BLM gets a lot of pressure from a lot of sides with a lot of different groups with a lot of different motives. You have cattlemen, you have oil and gas people, you have wildlife people, you have wild horse advocates like us. You know, our group is not in favor of doing gathers, but there's a reality where the range isn't going to support just an unlimited number of horses, and also we recognize there's a lot of political pressure from different groups coming in, pressuring these horses for removal.
Fertility control is becoming a more popular option for management as a way to get to the root of the problem. However, there are limitations there as well.
Basically, you go out and you dart the horses with this, it's a protein, and it creates a natural immune response in the mares, and it keeps them from being able to get pregnant for about a year. You got to go back out and redose them, so it's a little bit of a pain that way, but we feel like it's better to keep the horses on the range and keep their numbers under control that way than to keep doing this with the helicopters and rounding them up and put them in pens.
While there are no easy solutions to management of wild horses and burros, there is some agreement on the necessity for management.
There are groups out there that would push the concept of just leaving the horses alone. But I think kind of the harsh reality is that people don't want to come out and see, well, first, extensive range degradation if you have too many horses, and also you don't want to see horses starving and thirsting to death. It's a pretty miserable sight.
I would say not only in Utah but nationwide we're reaching a critical level because of population numbers because of continuing and ongoing drought conditions and impacts to the resource. It's not only the horses, but we're seeing wildlife impacts. We're seeing vegetation degradation. It's just compounding every year. We've actually run some models and some scenarios of if we took all the cows off the range, how long would it be before the range would be overrun with wild horses? And in reality, if we stopped gathering horses today, you'd be looking at 10 years, maybe at the most, and you'd run out of resources for wild horses because you'd be dealing with starvation, you'll be dealing with lack of water and forage. So, you know, the cows, that's not the issue. You've only got a limited amount of resource, and so you can't monopolize one resource because there's only limited out there.
If you want to get involved in this complicated issue, you can find more information regarding the Wild Horse Program on the BLM's website. There are also charitable organizations who are working towards creating horse sanctuaries, and you can find more info regarding these programs on our county seat website. Whatever the solution, eventually Congress will need to step in if any long-term plan is going to be put into effect. For the county seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
We will continue our discussion about the wild horse issue in Utah and the western United States when we return on the county seat.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
There is a place where the desert comes alive, where rain breaks forth from solid stone and gardens spring from blistered rock. There is a place with enough color to make a rainbow jealous, where boulders are bigger than buildings and cliffs are higher than clouds. There is a place that will straighten your step, tighten your grip, widen your eyes, and open your jaw. There is a place.
Color, it's something that can be seen. But have you ever wanted to reach out and touch it? Experience it. In San Juan County, Utah, color comes to life like nowhere else on earth. Color can be more than an abstract. Color can be your gateway to a new world. Visit San Juan County and explore the past, present, and future in a way that you've only dreamed of. San Juan County, color your experience.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our conversation today is about the wild horse situation. And as we are discovering, it's not only a situation here in Utah, but it stretches all the way across the West. And joining us for our panel discussion today, Commissioner Mark Whitney from Beaver County, Utah, Commissioner and veterinarian J.J. Goicoechea from Eureka County in Nevada, and Kevin Bunnell, who is the Southern Region Supervisor for the Division of Wildlife. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So there are a whole bunch of different tactics that the BLM tries to employ in their management of horses to try to stabilize the range. Obviously, at this point, with thousands of extra horses on the range, they're not working. So I'd like to kind of tick through each one. So let's start with roundups. Currently, they do roundups. Will roundups, do they stabilize the population?
They're not gathering enough horses off the range, Chad, right now to even make a dent. We got to remember that the horse herds will double every 4 years. So for example, just in the Southwest Desert in Beaver County and part of Iron County, the last couple of years they've taken several hundred head off. And this using their own numbers of, say, an AML of 2,000 in that area. So if they took 300 head, just last year alone they had another crop of 500 full and another 500 this year. So you can see the deficit there. It's not working.
Well, Mark's exactly right. And Yes, we are doubling every 4 to 5 years. You know, Nevada has over half of the wild horses in the West are within the state of Nevada. Will roundups work? Only if you can get down to low AML at some point. They claim their hands are tied today. The pipeline's plugged. We can't get adoption. We can't get rid of these excess horses fast enough. So when you're just coming into these problem areas and getting a percentage of the horses, we're just exacerbating the problem.
They've worked really hard at adoptions from time to time. Can adoptions fill that void? Do you think that's ever feasible?
Adoptions by themselves cannot. The horse market in the United States has come and gone, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But when you have a downturn in the economy, a horse is an expensive ticket item, and you're not going to see it in the backyard. You're not going to go out and adopt one of these horses. The horse market is really low. You can get a good quality horse for very similar to what you can get a Mustang for. Okay,
they're talking about, we call it vaccination. They're talking about birth control, so basically Norplants on horses. Is that going to work?
It will work in the short term. The problem with the products that they have, PZP and PZP22, porcine zona pellucida, that's where it was derived from, is the ovarian tissue of a pig, of the swine. It has to be boosted in order to work. So we get right back to our first topic, roundups. So we're going to round them up at however many thousands of dollars a horse to do that. We're going to give them a shot, and we're going to come back in 2 to 3 years. We have to round up those exact horses again and booster them. We can't catch them the first time. How do we ever hope to catch them the second time? If you don't booster them, what you see, and Kevin, you know, as a mammal specialist, you can relate to this. They don't raise any offspring for a couple of years. Their body condition increases. When that wears off, that birth control, you get a flush. You get more foals because all of a sudden more mares are cycling. And then all of a sudden, instead of a 20% reproductive rate, you could see a 30, 40, even a 50% reproductive rate in some of these horses.
If you capably can round them up and get your animal units back down to the level they should be, where is the pipeline messed up?
The pipeline is messed up. Starting, if you want to look at an organization, you don't start at the bottom. You start at the top, and we better go to Washington D.C. and it's Congress. They're not allocating the funds to let the BLM do their job. The BLM wants to do their job. These field offices know that there's a problem. They respect it and they want to take care of it. But it's just like everything else in America. The system is broke. America is broke, and Congress is not putting out the money so that they can take care of this problem. This is only one of the issues in America.
Well, are there not some legislative restrictions on the BLM as well as budgetary restrictions?
There are. I mean, all he's got to do is follow the Wild Horse and Burro Act of 1971. Very clear on how they need to manage those herds and manage the ranges with those herds. And they're breaking their own laws. If JJ, Kevin, or myself went to do something like that, we'd be trespassing, we'd be thrown in federal prison. We have to take the high road. We have to use the courts, whatever it does. And it's pretty good when you have to sue your own government against your own government.
But you know, Mark, Chad, you bring up an interesting point. There are things that are tying the agency's hands, and they tend to be these riders that you can't use any funds to expedite the sale of the horses, the unconditional sale. We were actually successful as a nation, as Western states, in getting that rider removed several years ago. They didn't sell one horse. The BLM didn't. So it goes beyond, yeah, even when they have the money and they have the funding to do what they want, the people in power within the Bureau of Land Management don't want to do it. There's more political pressure on them than we realize. So Congress and our leaders in the Bureau of Land Management, our director, our state directors, they're going to have to stand with Congress at some point and say, you know what, this is a problem, and we're going to have to do it together.
What does it take to convince them of a problem? I mean, we've done shows, we've gone out and looked at range conditions. What does it take to convince them?
This is an excellent place to start. It takes the general public. The public has to see we are deteriorating our rangelands. This isn't cows versus horses. This isn't counties versus the federal government. What are we doing to our rangelands? What are we doing to our ecosystem? We're in 3 years of drought, hydrologic drought right now. Our riparian areas and our water sources are being negatively impacted. We have to show that. If you care about wildlife, and I don't think anybody doesn't care about wildlife, then you cannot allow these horses to run at 200% AML and see what they're doing to our resources.
How, if horses were wildlife, how are they different than, say, deer or elk or some of the other animals out there?
Well, in the basics, they're not. I mean, there's only so many so many groceries on the landscape, whether it's being eaten by a cow or an elk or an antelope or a horse. And so you have to manage the whole system. And right now we have tools to manage deer and elk and pronghorn. We don't have the tools to manage horses. And so, you know, as JJ said, horses can be devastating on wildlife, in particular, and particularly around water sources. They'll defend a water source and not let other animals in, which can have a large impact on the local wildlife populations.
Good, and that raises a very good question, and it becomes a very good time for us to take a break. You're watching The County Seat. We're talking about the wild horse issue in Utah. We've got a great panel. We're discovering that this is a problem that spills over the borders of Utah and all across the West. In fact, while we think we're the epicenter, we actually aren't. We will continue our conversation here on The County Seat in just a minute after this commercial break, so please stay with us.
If you like the outdoors, there's not a better place to be. And like today for us, for instance, how many people did we run into? I mean, we really, you know, you've got this beautiful land pretty much to yourself, and where do you want to go? You want to go there? Go there. You know, it's wide open. It's amazing.
Isn't it time you found the balance you've been looking for? Uinta County, Utah.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing?
You just might find it in the air. June 18th through the 28th in Parowan is the biggest glider competition in the country. Watch as these pilots take off into the blue and soar for hundreds of miles on nothing more than thermals and their skill. Learn from the pros and find out how you can become a pilot yourself. The Parowan Glide Festival, June 18th through the 28th. Find out more at cedarcityayl.com.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Welcome back to The County Seat. We are discussing the wild horse issue today. We kind of took a pause, and I want to come back and redirect on something, because we've looked at the different ways of trying to solve the problem, and apparently litigation gets in the way. Now, there was some flutter we heard in the Utah papers about a release, birth control, and then putting horses back out on the range. Well, JJ, you were firsthand at that whole thing. That was in your area. Would you explain that situation to us?
Sure. This deals with the Fish Creek HMA in Eureka County. They did a new environmental assessment, they being the BLM, and they said what we're going to do is we're going to put these horses back that we've gathered at over AML, over the appropriate management level. We're going to treat them with fertility drugs, and this is the new path forward. This is our little study area. For the next 10 years, we're going to gather these horses, treat them. We're going to see if we can't curb reproduction. It won't work at low AML, so I don't know how it's going to work at high AML. But as the county, we actually filed an appeal of that EA and asked for a stay from an ALJ, administrative law judge, saying please don't turn those horses out because you did not follow NEPA properly as a coordinating agency, a cooperating agency with Eureka County. It took about 10 days. It was heard by the law judge. He denied our stay. The horses were in fact released back onto the range. Something, Chad, that was just wrong about that. The range that it was returned back on, that permittee, that rancher, him and his family have a decision that closes that to domestic livestock grazing because of rangeland health and drought. And yet we can put twice as many horses back out there and remove a man's livelihood. And that district manager told me on the phone, I did it because I don't have drought conditions or body conditions to worry about in those horses. That was just an outright lie.
Okay, so I just want to kind of back up and look at this from a broader picture, because I got something circling in my head here as you explain this to me. You're a couple of thousand horses over your limit in Nevada, at least, right?
Probably 10.
Okay, 10,000 horses over. And so they gathered how many?
There, 300 to 400.
So they gathered 300 to 400 against the 10,000 they need to remove from the range, and they put half of them back,
yes, sir,
even though they've got even though they've got birth control, they still put them back. So they're actually, they took numbers off and they're still adding to an overpopulation.
They are, and they did not calculate in this year's foal crop because it was before foaling. So when they released them, they said, our numbers are at high AML. Add 20% to it, because those mares that had foals in their belly, they foaled. Those foals are on the ground today. Our numbers are 20% over what they released.
Management is a problem in here, obviously.
It's huge.
Now, Mark, I have heard you say on this very show before, the state needs to manage the horse population. And as I recall, you were thumping the desk when you said it. So now I'm going to turn this to Kevin. If the state were able to run this, how would you do it?
Well, I can't give you specifics at this point, but I can tell you that there's a process that's been started. Governor Herbert has directed the Division of Wildlife and the Department of Agriculture to work together, the State Department of Agriculture, to work together to develop a plan. I don't know exactly what that'll look like in the end. We'll go through a process, but what I can tell you is you'll get an accessible process with input from the counties, with input from the producers, and you'll get common sense put into it. You know, an example that Mark's familiar with, one of the most decisive issues related to any animal in southern Utah has been the Utah prairie dog. And we just put together a state plan in cooperation with the counties and everybody involved to manage those on non-federal lands, which was a result of the lawsuit that a judge handed the authority back to the state of Utah. And we've got a plan that's working, that's cooperative with the counties, that people are happy with, and is still working to conserve prairie dogs in the places where they're appropriate. We could do a very similar thing with wild horses if given the opportunity. And like I said, I don't know if the lead agency would end up being the Division of Wildlife. It may very well be the Department of Agriculture, but at this point, Governor Herbert has asked those two agencies to work together to figure something out.
Can you, and maybe we'll save this for the last 3 minutes, because I want to open up the Pandora's box and ask the tough question that for as long as I follow this debate, nobody seems to want to talk about. But I'm going to try and talk about it here when we come back. We're going to take a break here on the county seat. We'll be back in just a minute. We're talking about wild horses today and looking to the future of how to solve the problem. We'll be right back.
The weekends just never feel like they're long enough. By the time you get to a destination, you're worn out and you may need a vacation to recover from your last vacation. The solution is closer than you think, and that's just what you need. You can find the desert at Little Sahara, the cool refreshment of Yuba Lake, escape to the green of the forest on the Nebo Loop, and witness the excitement of Juab's own extreme racing on June 27th. Make your escape to Juab County. It'll change your family forever.
Unlimited opportunity for adventure. It's all about knowing where to look. ATV adventures, rock crawling events, art festivals, and wildlife events. The opportunities are limitless. Plan your stay and join us for National ATV Jamboree, June 23rd through 27th, and Old Capitol Cruisers Car Show, June 26th through 27th. Pick your adventure in Millard County.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our topic today, wild horses. You know, this is probably the 4th or 5th time we've done a show on the wild horse issue since this has been on the air for the last 5 years. So I'm going to ask the question because nobody seems to actually want to come right out and say it. If you can't adopt them and you can't keep them in corrals in the east because they're overflowed, you got too many on the range and they're increasing at 20 or 30% per year, then what do you have to do to manage the problem? What is the solution? How do you politically do this?
It's very easily handled, Chad. You know, the most humane way to take care of this overpopulation or over AML is, the magical word is international adoption, or words. They've got to allow these horses to be adopted internationally. We can't use the word slaughter because, as you say, the groups, and even a lot of us,
we'll get emails just off of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right there.
So
I'm expecting
there's none of us that are
30 minutes.
there's none of us advocating slaughter. What I've always advocated, and I still think the best way to do it, and that's why I'm so excited to see the state manage them without limitations, is international adoption. That the South, the North, they'll take any horse we give them.
And you know, Marcus, beyond that, there's European countries and Eastern Bloc countries that they still use the horse as horsepower, what it was intended for. There's still livestock there, and we need to send those horses there. They can do some farming. That these young horses, these young Mustangs, can actually be trained to do what those individuals need over there. It's unconditional sale. It's international. It's across the border. You're exactly right.
If we don't do something different than birth control and sleight of hand tricks, what's going to happen? Where are we going to be in 5 years?
The sad thing about it is, Chad, and it truly is by doing nothing is absolutely desecrating the wild horse. They're going to kill themselves. They're going to eat themselves and drink themselves right out of a house and home and take wildlife and everything else with them.
In 1991-92, that winter, we actually saw that happen in Nevada. And I was actually a young college student at the time, and I did a speech on that, and I have some footage of horses that ate their manes and tails. They died during that winter, and I have photos of a foal that spring nursing a dead mare. Do we want to go back there? Is that what's right for the horse? Is that what the advocates want? Because that is where we are going. And then the next step beyond that is Australia. Look at the problem they have with their horses. We can't go there. You think slaughter is terrible? When those numbers explode to those high populations, they have to do something to protect the horse themselves. And that's euthanasia in a mass form. And we can't go there.
Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, the very basic tenet of wildlife management is to keep the population in balance with the resources that are available. And we do that in wildlife management in most of the cases that I'm involved with through hunting. And when you're trying to manage a population, you're removing the female segment of the population. We have cow elk hunts, we have doe deer hunts, we have doe pronghorn hunts. That's our tool for managing populations. Right now, that tool doesn't exist in the wild horse issue, other than taking mares off through some other means. But in the end, that's the only solution that's gonna get you to where you need to go. Otherwise, what these gentlemen described is absolutely true. And to have an animal starving to death because it's been mismanaged and not in balance with its resources, I can't think of much worse a fate for that animal.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Be sure to share this with your friends, and we'll see you next week on the county seat. Check out our website. We may have a couple of extra tidbits there on this that you may want to look at. We'll see you next week on the county seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be part of the solution. If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4 Utah.